I think this whole climate change debate will go down in history as one of the great frauds on the Australian people, similar to Y2K, I would suggest.
Doug, is Labor filibustering on the carbon legislation because you don't want to have a vote?
No, the situation is that we're seeking to have an inquiry, a Senate inquiry. That's the role of the Senate. That's what should happen. And I must say, when you hear the rhetoric from Senator Macdonald, saying the things he says, it's quite clear. The climate change sceptics, the climate change deniers, they are in complete control in the coalition. And really, this is short-termism, it's stupid politics. We need to take a long-term view. We need to protect the future generations.
But couldn't you deal with this in two stages? Your side says you agree with the government that you want to end the carbon tax. You just want to replace it with something different. Why not vote to end the carbon tax and have the debate about what replaces it at a later time?
Because there has to be something in place, and what we have at the moment is this nonsense called direct action that will just not work. You need to plant out an area twice the size of Victoria with trees. You're going to support and supplement the polluters. This is a nonsense. There has to be a price on carbon, and we want to work out how you should do that.
Corey, the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister, Greg Hunt, have been saying it would be a good Christmas present for the population if the carbon tax was to go, saying that households would be $550 better off, usually said on average, although the Prime Minister didn't use that qualifier this morning. It's not the case, though, is it? Even if the carbon tax is repealed now, it's not due to come into force until the middle of next year, and the full benefit, if it is to come through, wouldn't be realised until the middle of 2015.
Linda,
it's hardly a Christmas present now,
Linda,
is it?
One of our commitments to the Australian people was that the first order of business would be to abolish the carbon tax. And it's interesting that both of the major parties took to the electorate at their last election the fact that the carbon tax was dead and buried. We're honouring our commitment. It's disappointing the Labor Party are not. And I take umbrage with what Senator Cameron said about the direct action policy. That we have got industry people saying it will be effective and it will be beneficial. It's going to have a direct net environmental benefit. It's going to have the same impact on the climate as the carbon tax, which is, probably negligible, but that's not the point. The point is, no matter what you think about climate change, we're going to have direct environmental benefits, unlike Labor's carbon tax.
The benefits, if they come, will take a while to flow through, won't they?
Well, the benefits will be directly. We'll have, increased water retention and fertility of our soils. We'll have more trees planted. There'll be energy efficiency incentives for industry. It will reduce emissions, there's no doubt about that. And we'll be playing our role in a global environmental movement. I think that's a healthy thing. A tax does nothing except put the price of electricity up for Australian consumers and makes the family budget tougher to balance.
Before I come back to you, Doug, Greg Hunt's been critical of the carbon tax, saying it did nothing to reduce emissions, that emissions were to go up under the tax. He's got a report where he says the carbon tax reduced emissions by 0.1%, I think 300,000 tonnes. Don't those figures show that the tax did reduce emissions, and did it while the economy was still growing? Well,
the economy is growing at a much slower rate than it otherwise would, and what has been forecast by successive governments, might I say, on the Labor side. So we've seen a downturn in industry. But the simple fact is that the carbon tax is putting a burden on every Australian family, on every business, making it uncompetitive, and it's exporting jobs overseas. You can't argue with that, or you can, but it's a disingenuous argument because it's the truth.
Doug, was the reduction in carbon emissions that this report suggested, just 0.1%, as big as you hoped for, or would you expect a bigger reduction in emissions?
The major reduction was in the electricity sector. That was about 7%. That's very important. That's where you have to make the difference. And when you talk about cost to individuals, remember that $1,300 per family was the cost that was analysed by the Treasury and the Department of Climate Change, looking at this so-called direct action. So when you're giving government money, public money to the polluters, when you're handing money over for them to do who knows what, it's very expensive. You need a huge bureaucracy to run it. It's never been successful before, and this won't be successful. This is a nonsense of a policy.
Could not some of the things done under the coalition's policy have an improvement for the environment?
There could be a small improvement in some areas depending on a whole range of issues, but fundamentally every economist of any standing says you have to put a price on carbon to make the difference.
I would say that some improvement in some areas is much better than no improvement and bigger taxes for the Australian people.
7% reduction in electricity, that's fine. It's good.
The electricity prices have gone up. It's extraordinary.
We might move on now because, as I say often, we probably won't get agreement on this area. As we said,